This is the GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is flyer number 281, entitled Male Chauvinism from a Masculist Perspective. Description. This flyer argues that male chauvinism, a feminazi term, or male dominance, the equivalent masculist term, is genetically determined, and that masculist scientists should attack fluffy feminist hypocrites to destroy feminazi lies, so that the gender laws can be menfaired, so that men can become fathers again, in order to prevent the genocidal actions of the feminazis, who made the divorce courts so toxic for men that 2/3 of young men refuse to marry and refuse to have kids, spending their money on themselves. The flyer itself. From centering, it swings wildly. Still. Okay. Male Chauvinism from a Masculist Perspective by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer looks at the phenomenon of male chauvinism, but from a masculist perspective, showing why it exists and why it's perfectly justified, something the feminazis will just have to accept, because it will never go away for genetic reasons. In the 70s, I used to be an avid male feminist. I was hoping that feminism would change women away from being the vapored housewives of the 50s and 60s when I was growing up, into women who had minds that they used, with original opinions, who were stimulating to talk to, unlike my mother's generation, who were so intellectually vacuous that I could not take them seriously. So I read a lot about feminism at that time and absorbed their ideas into my own personality. One of the main ideas of the feminists of the 70s, that is second wave feminists, in brackets, who push for political and economic rights, for example, equal pay for equal work, equal access to the professions, the right to reject an unwanted pregnancy, aka abortion right, etc., close bracket, was the idea of male chauvinism, that is, the unconscious attitude of men, that men were superior to women, that men didn't really listen to women, not take them seriously, treating women really only as fuckholes. Without respectable minds, that is, as having child minds that men could not take seriously. This attitude of men infuriated the feminists of the time, so they chose a derogatory term to express their contempt of it, namely male chauvinism. This flyer explains why men have such attitudes towards women and justifies why men do have these attitudes. This flyer states that these male chauvinist attitudes are realistic and unavoidable, given the genetic differences that women have relative to men. I'll begin by stating how I was prompted to write this flyer and how this experience reminded me of my readings of feminist literature in the 70s and 80s. Recently, I was watching a documentary on YouTube on time travel, where the experts in the field, all men of course, were introduced by a pretty young airhead who obviously knew nothing about the field, but who was able to read, that is, read a teleprompter. Each time she came on, I felt irritated. I felt, why is this pretty young thing, this airhead, on this show, introducing and elaborating on what the male experts of world reputation were saying? It felt forced, unnatural, incongruous. Why was this silly woman here? Why was she put there? I assume it was for marketing reasons, that is, to encourage more pretty young things, that is, innumerate, iscyanate females, to be more motivated to watch it, if they saw someone of their own kind introducing all these famous, big-brained male world experts in a topic as abstruse and highly mathematical as time travel, that is based on tensor calculus and Einstein's general theory of relativity, which is master's level mathematical physics, that probably only one person in 100 has the brains, that is the IQ, to understand, and probably only one person in 1,000 who has both the brains and the interest to bother to teach themselves all the technical details. So this pretty airhead, this innumerate, cyanate incongruity, ruined the documentary for me. I felt irked watching her. It reminded me when I was a teenager, seeing sexy, fuckable, 20-year-old females in bikinis lounging on the fenders of sports cars at car shows. I had the same feeling then, asking myself, what are these fuckable airhead femalians doing with these cars? It was only later that I came to have an intuitive understanding that it was a marketing trick of the sports car manufacturers, trying to appeal to the unconscious reasoning of the potential male customers. Quote, buy the car, and this kind of female will be attracted enough to you to want to fuck you. End quote. These two instances got me thinking about the feminist contempt for male chauvinism, because it was precisely that attitude that I was manifesting towards the pretty airhead on the YouTube documentary on time travel and the nubile fuckables on the sports cars. But now, I'm a masculist, a scientist, a PhD full research professor teaching PhD level pure math and math physics to the world for free with my YouTube lecture course videos and the electronic libraries I build in these and other subjects by putting up tens of thousands of links to full content technical books supplied by Google. So, this prompted me to think, I'm showing a male chauvinist attitudes towards these female airheads. That would piss off the feminazis. End quote. That is how I would have thought in the 70s. But I'm writing this in the 10s. 4 decades later, and am now a masculist scientist, so what are my attitudes now? I'll spend the next few paragraphs justifying the male chauvinist attitudes of men, and then follow that with suggestions on how masculists can use these male chauvinist attitudes to help them menfare the gender laws, and to attack and undermine the current cultural dominance of the feminazis. Firstly, we men need some relabeling. The term male chauvinist is obviously biased towards the feminists. So what could we men use that would be more favourable to men? This flyer will claim that men are naturally superior to and dominate women at the top end of the performance scale. So how about simply using the term male dominance? I will use this term from now on. Why is male dominance unavoidable? For genetic reasons. In many of my flyers, I push the idea of natural superiority of men over women at the top end of the performance scale. For example, men have a higher average IQ score compared to women by 4 IQ points. Men have a 10% higher IQ variance than women, in parentheses, very accurately measured from the hundreds of thousands of US school kids who have their IQs measured each year. So the IQ variance ratio is very accurately known each year, and it comes out monotonously at 1.1, so that the morons and the genii are male. Women have 10% smaller brains than men, so have 10% smaller neural processing capacities than men. So it's not surprising that women have invented almost nothing, created almost nothing, build almost nothing compared to men. It's men who build societies, and women parasite off them to raise the next generation. It's for this reason that in all cultures, boy babies are more valued than girl babies, because from long experience, all cultures know that a boy baby is much more likely to grow up to be a highly productive member of the culture than a girl baby, who will become just another baby factory and childminder, which, no matter how vital, is not status worthy, because any woman can fuck and raise kids. Men have much higher testosterone levels than women, so are a lot more aggressive, ambitious, dogged, persistent, so achieve far more than women, hence dominate the entries in the Who's Who books. Men just do more, produce more, outshine women across the board, which is why societies, all societies, value men's contributions more than women's, with the obvious exceptions of women's monopolies of vagina and brain. and womb. But even those two traditional monopolies that women have had are about to be superseded by male engineering genius. The sex bots and the art wombs will be with us in a decade. Early forms of the sex bots are already on the market, with their luscious curves, their movie star faces, their creamy, grippy vaginas that women cannot compete with, given that a third of women are fat and that another third are obese, making most women sexually repulsive to men due to women's excess rolls of fat. Now, how can masculist scientists use the above facts to promote masculism and to combat the feminazis? The feminazis have become genociders, that is, they are indirectly responsible for whole populations being wiped out due to their takeover of the divorce courts. The fluffy feminist hypocrites have made the divorce courts so toxic for males that in today's world, 2/3 of young men under 35 refuse to marry, refuse to have kids, and spend their money on themselves. In other words, they are MGTOWs, that is, men going their own way. And due to their boycott of paternity, they are directly wiping out whole populations by refusing to reproduce the next generation. But these MGTOWs are merely reacting to the toxicity of the divorce courts as generated by the hated feminazi bitches, the fluffy feminist hypocrites, who have taken over the divorce courts and persuaded the hated gender politicians to create divorce laws that are so heavily favourable to fluffy women. Thus these fluffy feminist hypocrites accept equal rights in the parliaments but remain fluffy parasites in the divorce courts. That is, these fluffy feminists want equal rights for women, but reject equal obligations for women by refusing to FIP up, that is, become financially independent persons, by bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and university, so that they end up with a fluffy crap diploma in a non-STEM, non-profession major that the economy does not value. So these women inevitably become fluffies, who then in their 30s, when their biological clocks are ticking hard, look around for some manslave to parasite upon, to have him pay for the middle-class house she wants to raise her kids in. A decade later, she will be bored with him, her 41st penis, and will take him to the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court system and financially massacre him, ruining his life by stripping him of his kids with a 90% probability, taking his house, half his possessions, child support, and often alimony, so that he remains a manslave to her after the divorce the way he was before the divorce. The above is such a rotten deal for men that the MGTOW movement is no surprise. Young men see the awful damage done to their fathers and older male friends, so wash their hands of marriage and fatherhood. These young men are not fools. They are doing a cost-benefit analysis and coming to the conclusion, in their hundreds of millions, that marriage and paternity really suck. So they go MGTOW as a result. Thus the feminazis have to be stopped. They are now genociders, wiping out whole populations, so how to stop them? By destroying their beliefs. And how to do that? By using masculist ideas, that is, a superior ideology that feminism cannot compete with, by beating the feminazis at their own game. Now I can connect two of the above dots, that is, how to use the phenomenon of male dominance and the destruction of feminist ideology. I suggest that a handful of masculist scientists with intellectual abilities superior to the smartest of the feminazis attack fluffy feminism with all its hypocrisy and destroy it, undermining its credibility by getting on the broadcast media and smashing feminazi genocide, by utterly discrediting the doctrine of fluffy feminism and all its hypocrisy. Finding such masculist scientists should not be hard. There are many male scientists who have had similar gender-based experiences to my own. I only have to look at my own case to see that. All my adult life, I have never been able to share my math, physics, philosophy, male brain with females. Women are just not interested in these subjects and are incapable of competing with the best of the men in these areas. Hence, women win only a pathetic 1% of the Science Nobel Prizes. Women are definitely the inferior sex in that respect. Not being able to share my intellectual passions with females causes me to resent them for their inferiority. I look down on women as child minds. Such a male chauvinist attitude from a feminazi perspective makes sense from the female point of view, looking up to a superior performance level of the male. And the attitude of male dominance makes sense from the male point of view, looking down to an inferior performance level of the female. Both these two relative positions are as valid as the other. It's just a matter of relative perspective, the female or the male. But as a male scientist who is politically conscious that the feminazis, in capital letters, have to be stopped, given they are indirectly wiping out whole populations, then I and other masculist scientists can use our genetic superiority to smash the feminazis, beating them at their own game, because at the top end of the performance scale, women cannot compete with men. We men have the benefit of larger brains, genius-level IQs, higher testosterone levels than women, so women have no chance. When a handful of such men collectively start lashing out at the feminazis, telling the world population that these feminazi genociders have to be stopped so that men can be persuaded to be fathers again, then major cultural engineering can begin. Society needs to be taught that the feminazis are evil because they preach lies. These lies are like a religion to women. They are comforting to women because they tell women that they are as capable as men and can do whatever men can do. Of course, this is a lie, as the scientific evidence shows, and in my own case, as shown by my daily life experience. I can't share my intellectual passions with women, so I lead a rather lonely heterosexual life, always looking down on women as the inferior sex, as having child minds, unable and disinterested in learning what impassions me. The masculist scientists need to push home the idea that men are the superior sex and beat the feminazis at their own game. That is, push a superior, that is, more scientifically accurate ideology onto society and use that ideology to transform society, to menfaired the gender laws, to bring in the para-paternity rejection right, and menfaired the many examples of gender discrimination against men across the board. The next step for the masculists, the few of whom who are scientists and in the intellectual elite, is to recruit more of their own kind, then to educate them to become masculists, so that they become angry and convinced that the feminazi, fluffy feminist hypocrites have become genociders and have to be stopped. These masculist scientists can then dominate the broadcast media with their ideas that the smartest feminists will not be able to refute, because the masculist scientists' views are based on science, whereas the feminazi views are mostly is-cyanate, fairy, PC bullshit, having more in common with religion than science. Most feminists are fluffy is-cyanates anyway, and don't care much whether the feminazi ideas that they hear from their female peers are true or not. All they care about is, do these ideas feel good? If the feminazis preach that women are as capable as men, then since that is what these fluffy feminists want to believe, it feels good to them. And if these ideas just aren't true when one looks scientifically, then that does not matter to them. To most feminazis, feeling takes precedence over facts, that is, emotions over science. This attitude of the feminazis, particularly the fluffy feminists, merely increases the level of contempt that masculist scientists show towards them. The dismissal of scientific evidence, simply because such evidence doesn't make women feel good, is treated with contempt by the masculists for its childishness, its female child brain inferiority. Masculist scientists sneer at such fluffy feminist attitudes, at such feelings above facts attitudes. At the top end of the performance scale, men dominate totally. Statistically, there just aren't any women at the genius level of performance, so that men who are the genii just ignore women, don't think about them, and just get on with what they do, forgetting that all their ideas come from men, are directed towards other men, with only men in the discussion groups, etc. It is to these men that the masculist scientists need to direct their attention, so that they can be recruited to take up the masculist scientist cause, and then to save the society from wiping itself out due to the paternity strike of the MGTOWs, caused by the fluffy feminist genociding by the feminazis, who have to be destroyed. That is, their feminazi beliefs need to be totally discredited. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channels de GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers, and de GARIS Essays. Patreon, patreon.com/profhugodegaris. Minds, minds.com/profhugodegaris.